No, he brought them in. Sure, brought them in, no?
Yeah, but
Oh, sure, did bring them in.
on Ben's place. So.
Why this place?
I'll take a few.
Are they gluten free?
Yes.
Gluten free, they're not very exciting. Gluten free,
Okay,
they're not that good. There's a reason why I give all that.
Sounds good.
I bought them. Yeah, you don't like them, they're doing the shit.
I'm taking two, Schwab. I'm not having them now. Is that okay?
Anytime. You take the whole bag.
Why this place? Are they gluten free? Look at this. Yeah, I want to tell you what I'm being offered. How to look better on Zoom. Sarah Bright. Never heard of her? 74,000 singer. Trump loses it.
I've lost a lot.
Moishi.
It's listening to Moishi when he's speaking.
Whatever Moishi is listening.
Trump, Biden, COVID, or lack of COVID.
I don't think he watches anything through COVID.
Okay. Right. Another sin.
As long as it's here at the end.
Yeah.
As long as it's here at the end, that's all matters.
We're up to Daf Ein Gimel Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top. Yes, right, okay. The Mishnah told us many different cases. A person shechted Kol Pesach with intention that it's a shlomim shechted that it's a Kol Pesach. Lots of different cases. A person shechted Kol Pesach thinking le'oichlo v'shnei le'oichlo. What the Gemara does is, the Gemara asks that all these cases of Pshita, they're all obvious. And the Gemara works out that none of the cases of the Mishnah actually have a Chiddush except for the one case where Blessed Mishra argue. The reason why all the other cases were brought was simply once the Mishnah quotes one case, often the Mishnah brings other cases which are similar or contrast to it, because it's a flow of the Mishnah. But the only Chiddush in our Mishnah, means, for example, take the case where a person shechs Kol Pesach le'oichlo v'shnei le'oichlo. Now, what's the din normally? Not on Shabbos. A person shechs Kol Pesach le'oichlo v'shnei le'oichlo. What's the din? No, that was with the Shmuel and Shlish. But le'oichlo v'shnei le'oichlo, we said it's kosher. Le'oichlo v'shnei le'oichlo is kosher. Since it's kosher, so if it's Erev Shabbos, what's the din? Of course, it's potter. It's on a mitzvah. So the Mishnah does not need to teach us that in such a case is potter from Chilul Shabbos. Let's see more insight. Shochter shleilo echlov pshita. Given to us some possible, there it's possible to talk about where you did only shleilo echlov. There. Hachachai. Answer more should the sefer potter to the veshachai. The sefer which says the echlov shleilo echlov is potter. So here it says chai. Fading more bonami pshita. We should the Hossam kosher. The Mishnah impact in Tomei Nishchat tells us that if you shechted lishmoy v'shleilo it's kosher. Acha potter. Of course you're potter. You haven't done an aver. And either the time the shochter shleilo b'Shabbos Tomei shleilo echlov. Since we mentioned Shnei Lishmoy on Shabbos, we also mentioned Shnei Leichlov. Why do you have to mention the case of Shnei Lishmoy? We want to tell us the halachas of Talmud v'Amitzvah, which is a machlekes Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Right. So for the Eker Chiddush of our Mishnah is machlekes Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Now, normally when a person does a halacha on Shabbos, he's only chayav Misa or Chatos, if it's a proper malacha, meaning the malacha has value. Let's say you go to a house, you knock it down. So says one of the halachas. Are you chayav to bring a Chatos if you do by mistake on Shabbos? Why not? No, it's a shogeg. You should be chayav Chatos. You haven't achieved anything. You haven't achieved. You haven't achieved anything. You've not achieved. You've not done anything. Oh, the Mishnah says.
If you're angry with that person, you have achieved something.
Oh, the person could talk about that particular case. I said, well, I don't want to go off the point too much. You haven't achieved anything. Oh, the Mishnah says, so see a chayav. So what's it mean? How can the Mishnah say a chayav? You've not achieved anything. The Mishnah there says, it's so some not living. But what happens is you've got a brick which has been put on incorrectly and the wall is now crooked. So you take away the brick in order to put a better brick. So that is so some not living. But if you just knock down the wall, you're not chayav. That is important halacha. So now, when it comes to shoichet, which is chabur, creating a wound, the halacha is that's a malacha. If you hit somebody very hard, you bruise him, you've done the malacha of shoichet chabur. Now the question is, what have you achieved? What have you achieved by hitting somebody? Let's say you cut somebody and he's bleeding now. So you're chayav because of shochet. What have you achieved? So it's a big machloikas where there are certain malachas which are so intrinsically destructive, whether they need to be an achievement or not. The more now, the whole next sugya are going according to the man that you do need to achieve something. So when a person's chayav for shochet, what have you achieved by doing shechita? The answer is two cases Rashi brings normally. One is that you can eat the meat. That's a big achievement, right? Because now you can eat it. So therefore, or another achievement is that let's say you've got a dog, and the dog in the older days seemed to enjoy eating blood. So if you cut something, now he's bleeding, what have you achieved? The dog has food. Again, the person's mekalkel b'chabur. If you cut somebody on Shabbos and you hold that mekalkel b'chabur is potter, when would you be chayav for cutting somebody on Shabbos? Only if your intention is in order that the dog should have what to eat. If you go up to somebody and stab him for no reason whatsoever, let's say because you're irritated with him, which is more according to one person says, then you're not chayav chatos. The question in our Mishnah is,
Bloodletting would be the same thing.
bloodletting, is that an achievement? I don't know. One could argue it's not an achievement in the blood. It's an achievement, maybe, I'm not sure. It's before, I don't know. Okay. So the Gemara now discusses, in our case of our Mishnah, there was a number of cases where we said Yechayev Chatos. A number of cases Yechayev Chatos. And what the Gemara asks is, in all these cases, we have to find out what have you achieved. Now, in normal cases, when you shecht an animal, what's the main achievement when you shecht an animal? What's the normal case? What's the achievement? Moshe, when you shecht an animal on Shabbos, Yechayev Chatos. Yechayev Chatos. What's the achievement? What's the achievement? You killed an animal. Meat is ready to eat. But probably in our Mishnah, most of the cases we'll talk about where you've done something so bad that they call let's say so you can't eat it. Since you can't eat it, you haven't achieved anything. That is the whole topic over here. And the more keeps narrowing it down to more and more complicated cases where there's less and less of an achievement. It says, one of the said to his son, you go to Abzeka, ask him the following question. A person who holds the Mekal B'Chabur is potter, then what would the din be? The Mishnah says if you shecht it with intention for those who can't eat it. Well, what happens to the Korban Pesach? It is possible. So nobody can eat it. Again, you shecht the Korban Pesach or the Pesach for people that are not going to eat it. So the Korban Pesach is possible. What are you going to do the Korban Pesach? Anybody know what do you do the Korban Pesach that's possible? You burn it. Where do you burn it? Beis HaSreifah. Non Mizbeach Beis HaSreifah. So have you achieved anything by the shechita? No. For the Gemara, chayav, ma tikkun, what have you fixed? Answers the Gemara, tikkunim olu lo yerdu. The halacha is that a korban which is possible, generally speaking, we say, if psului b'kodesh, im olu lo yered. Im psului is not b'kodesh, im olu yered. This is a phrase we have many times as Zvachim, which is kedai to have written down and put inside your wallet. What is this phrase? What is the phrase? Psului b'kodesh means that what went wrong was something after it was already kodesh. For example, you shechted it correctly and everything else went smoothly, then it became tummy. So if you put it on the mizbeach, we leave it on the mizbeach. Psului shelui b'kodesh, for example, you served the animal as avodah zarah, or the animal had a mum. So this animal, long before it became kodesh, it already had problems. What's the halacha in such a case? In Allah, you take it down. You take it off the mizbeach. Says the Gemara over here, it's called psului b'kodesh. The psula happened when it was already kodesh. So if you put it on the mizbeach, you don't take it off. So what did you gain when you shechted the Korban Pesach shloi loichlov? You gained that if you put it on the mizbeach, it will stay on the mizbeach. So the shechita did some higher level of kedusha. Says the Gemara, tikkun. Says the Gemara, shochtiv, it's a bal mum. And here you can't answer that if it's a Baal Mum, you gain them Olo Lo Yevid. Why can't you answer that? Why will it be Yevid? Very good. Oh, somebody's listening. Because the Psula is before it's Kodesh. It was a Baal Mum before. So the Aloch is Olo Yevid. So what?
For the people, the problem is.
No, the next we'll move on. In Shachtim, this is a Baal Mum. Shachtim, if it's a Baal Mum, it's Chayav. What do you do? The problem is that it's a Baal Mum. Answers the Gemara. Answers more like this. We have Shittas of Akiva. Shita Akiva is that even though with all mumim in Allah, what's the din? Yevet. The exception is Dukin Shaban. Dukin Shaban is a cataract on the eye. I'm going to say this once only because it's important to remember. Rabbi Akiva holds Dukin Shaba'inim Allah lo Yevet. Why lo Yevet? Because the halacha is that a bird that's got a cataract is even lechatchila allowed to go on the mizbeach because of the fact that by birds ein tamus v'zachrus ba'oifos. Dave, do you remember that expression? What's mean ein tamus v'zachrus ba'oifos?
No, it has a zakhut.
Yes.
There's no movement by birds.
Ein tamus v'zachrus ba'oifos. A bird doesn't have to be a tamim. It doesn't have to be male. You can have a female bird. You can have a mum bird. So Rabbi Akiva holds that a dukin shebain wants the din. Im Allah lo yevet. So our Mishnah when it's talking about Baal Mum is talking about dukin shebain. Says the Gemara, "Ticket the dukin shebain, v'alimu Rabbi Akiva the mama lo yevedu." The Gemara, very good. But what about the next case? Shochte in such treifa b'seisa. It's got a hidden treifa pot hobegolu. Let's say it's missing so much of the body that it's definitely going to die. Chayev. Ma'atikin. What have you gained? If you shecht an animal which is a treifa, where it's a clear, massive mum, it's such a big mum that it's going to die soon. What's the halach if it goes on the mizbeach? You take it off. So what did you gain? Answer is, well, tikin or hitzmi de nevela, that it's not a nevela, it's a treifa. Who knows what's the halacha difference, what the halachic difference there is between a nevela and a treifa? Why is a nevela? What's a treifa?
The tumah plus the eggs.
We'll talk about tumah at the moment. Let's leave the tumah.
Treifa is something that can be repaired, right?
The mice,
No,
the malika.
you're getting off the point. Treifa is an animal that died without being shechted. It got devoured by a lion, it fell off a cliff, that's a treifa. Nevela is an animal that was shechted, but there's something wrong with it. Sorry, I said the wrong way around. I'm very sorry. Nevela is an animal that died, fell off a cliff. A treifa, it got shechted, but inside it's missing its lungs or something, so a hole in the lungs. In those cases, so what's the difference? And the nevela is tamei, a treifa is not. So we asked the question: the person who shechts a korban posel on Shabbos is chayav chatos because of sheichet. The Gemara is betkalkel. Answer was not betkalkel because he's achieved something. What has he achieved? What's he achieved? Even if it's a treifa, what's he achieved? That the animal is not a tamei. That's an achievement. The animal is not tamei. The Gemara asks one final question. Maske flora vina. Hode tanya sheichet chatos b'Shabbos b'chutz la'avodas zor chayv aleo sholosh chatos ma'atikim. The Gemara finds a case where it's possible to do 3 averos in one go. Right? Instead of killing 2 birds in one, so you're killing 3 birds in one. So 3 terrible averos in one go. You take an animal. This is an animal. You shecht it outside the base of the. So you shecht it for avodas zor. So that's already one avera. Shecht it for avodas zor. And you're shechting it on Shabbos, which is Chilul Shabbos, and you're shechting it b'chutz. You're shechting a korban outside the Beis Hamikdash. 3 terrible averos. Shechting a korban outside the Beis Hamikdash, plus it's Shabbos, so you're doing it of Issa, plus it's for avodas zor. So you have to bring 3 chatois. What have you achieved? Now, what would we normally answer? What did we say before? What did you achieve before? That it's not tummy. The problem is that avodas zor is tummy. The halacha is anything which is brought for avodas zor is automatically tummy. If it's tummy, so therefore you haven't achieved anything because it's still tummy. Answers the Gemara, you have achieved it's not eva min achai, meaning that if a goy was to eat it, it's not chayav misa for it. So every time you shecht an animal, you've always achieved something. What are the different achievements you can have when you shecht an animal? One is it's not even min achai. 2, it's not tomei if you've been nevela. 3, if it's Allah lo yerid. So therefore you've always got episode achievement, and therefore you always have chatos. Okay. New topic. Shochte v'neidav v'chol. Omar avon amarav. Osham shaditik levi'ir v'shochte stam kosher lo ila. It's kosher for nana. Here we have a few foundation ideas which is so important to remember. It's a big pity if we don't get this clear. The halacha is chomesh chatois mesos. There are 5 chatois which we kill them. Do you know how we kill them? We lock them up in a room and we starve the animal to death. What are the 5 chatois? Right. Oh, I'm going to like this. A chatos, for example, Let's argue like this. Ask you, let's see, what would you pass, Moshe? You've got a shlomim. Person, Yaakov donated a shlomim. Yaakov donated a shlomim, and Yaakov dies. What do you do with the shlomim? Anybody know? What? No, shlomim depends what it's what. Well, it's sure you have to figure it. Levi, honestly. Again, Yaakov donates a shlomim. He dies. His son brings it. A chatos. Yaakov donated a chatos and he died. What does this do with it? Nothing. Why? Why can't he bring it down? His father's dead. Very good. As you all pointed out, a chatos is to be mechaper. He's dead. There's nobody to mechaper. So what we do is we lock it up till the animal starves to death. That is the halacha, one of the cases. Now, an osham, we have the same problem. An osham where the owner died, Yaakov died, right? Or alternatively, a more complicated case. Listen very carefully. Yaakov took an osham. Here's an osham. He lost it. Couldn't find it. It disappeared, ran away. So he took another one, a second osham. He shechted this one, brought it as a korban, and now he finds this one. What should he do with it? If it would be a shlomim, what would you do with it? Bring it anyway, a gift, who cares? But it's an osham. You can't bring an osham as a gift. So what do you do with it? We don't lock it up and die. What we do is more complicated. We put it in a field. We establish that it should be for an oilah. We wait for it to become a Baal Mum, and then we sell it. We use the money for an oilah. And one of the things we use it for something called Oilas Kayitz HaMizbeach. Oilas Kayitz HaMizbeach was that every so often there was nothing being brought on the Mizbeach. Nothing being brought on the Mizbeach. We don't want the Mizbeach to be lonely or empty. So what would you do is, you would bring up certain karbonos. Kayitz Mizbeach literally means the dessert of the Mizbeach. Again, you've got Chatos Shmeisa Ba'aleh, where the owner dies, you kill the Chatos. Osham, right, it's a more system. Osham, you wait for it to get a Baal Mum, you use the money to buy an Oilah L'Kayitz Mizbeach. Now, what happens if before it got a Baal Mum, you went and you shechted it as a korban oilah? That is the discussion we're going to discuss now. Really, what should you have done with this osham? You should let it go in a field, wait for it to get a mum, sell it, and use the money to buy an oilah. But you didn't. You jumped the gun and you shechted for an oilah. Says Rav, let's see the words of Rav again. That you established it for grazing. We're going to have a whole discussion whether you need akira or you don't need akira. Akira means like this. When you got a korban that's meant to be for a shlomim, a pesach, a osham, and you decide now to make it into B, does it need to be an akira? Akira, what's the good English word for akira? Uproot, redesignate. Uproot or redesignate. I'll use the word uproot right now. Uproot. Do you need to uproot it from its first thing to reestablish it as the second thing? Rav said you took an osham, you shechted it as an oilah, without designating it as an oilah. That means without uprooting it and saying, I'm stopping it being an osham, I'm going to let it graze. You just shechted it as an oilah. It works. Alma leiboy akira, you do not need to uproot the original name. Why talk about a case where you sent it out to grazing? Just talk about a case where you took an osham immediately and shechted as a oilah. That's no good. Why? If we take an osham when it's kapu ba'aleh and shecht it automatically as an oilah, so people will take an osham when it's kapu ba'aleh and shecht it as an oilah, and we'll have people changing karbonos back and forth. That we can't have. And we're not saying, where do we see this? Now, osham shemeisu ba'alov shniskapu ba'alov yirad sheyistoiv. Let it graze until it gets a ba'amum v'yimoche v'yipudamav l'nedav. Ablezer ema yomus. Rashi says that Rabbi Lezer holds chatos and osham always have the same halachas, because the Torah says v'hoyo kachatos ke'osham. There are 3 places in Shas where Rabbi Lezer says that osham has the same halacha as chatos. Does anybody know the 3 cases that osham has the same halacha as chatos? No, that we agree with, because Kodesh Kodshim. That has exactly this malachas chatos. The three cases. Now, look, what's after this died, we kill it, we don't let it graze. That's one. If you shecht it lishmoy, it's pos like chatos. Al chatos, with the blood going inside the Beis Hamikdash, the chatos comes possibly destroy it, so to by Asham. Goes into the Beis Hamikdash. It goes into the Kodesh. Normally, that's it. Rabbi Yeshua Oima, Yemochev Yavi b'dam of Oila, but dam of M with its money, yes. Aval gufa lo, not with its body. The goes alach kapot if they kapot shmamino. So you've got three stages of this Asham. Let's go very slowly. We've got Yaakov, a wonderful person, didn't have very big an Asham. By mistake, it didn't have very big an Asham. Can he bring it now as an Oila, the Asham as Oila? Of course not. It's an Asham, you can't get it as an Oila. But by mistake, let's say he died, or let's say he bought another Asham because he lost this one now, he wants to bring it as an Oila. Theoretically, says the Gemara, he could. But if we allow that, he might then start bringing other Ashamos, which he hasn't, so therefore we don't allow it. But once he sends it to be grazed, then if he shechts it as a stam, it becomes an Oila because you don't need akira, you don't need uprooting. The Mishnah talks like this. A person shechts a Korban Pesach on Erev Pesach, and given on with Beis, top of the page. Again, imagine you go to Beis Hamikdash, and imagine all of us get together, Mitzvah Hashem, bring a Korban Pesach. And we designate Ben, we say to Ben, will you shecht it for us? And we do a trick on him. We all, every single one of us, I suppose he wasn't in the group, because let's say you shecht it for us, but you weren't part of the group. We all designate ourselves and another Korban Pesach. So now, is he shechting a Korban Pesach? No, because there's nobody left on it. What is it? Oh, we'll see. It's a shlomim. But let's go slowly first, because not straight away a shlomim. Wait a second. He didn't know that. He didn't know. Wait a second. He didn't know. Let's go slowly. Imagine we all get together to a Korban Pesach. We say, will you shecht it for us? Yes. And then we all change our minds and we join a different group. So this animal now is no longer Korban Pesach. And it was Erev Pesach like this, says Shabbos. He shecht it on Shabbos. So now we go to him and say to you, do you know what we did to you? We made you be Mechal Shabbos. Because instead of shechting Korban Pesach, we tricked. What's the din? What's the Mishnah say? What's the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says that he's not chayav. He's not chayav chatos. Why not chayav chatos? Why is he not chayav chatos? By the way, Torah b'dvar mitzvah. Torah b'dvar mitzvah. He was trying to do a mitzvah. Fine. Now, what's he going to do with this animal? He shechted it. If it's Shabbos, what's he going to do with it? Anybody know? It's Shabbos. What's he going to do with this animal? He shechted it, and suddenly we say to boo. None of us joined you. What are you going to do with this sheep? What are you going to do with it?
Eat it myself.
You can't. You never designated yourself on it. You have to get rid of it. Now, here we'll come into something called ibud sur. And this is Yisodis. It's not the easiest step. First of all, you got a major problem. It's Shabbos. Shabbos, you can't do anything. So you won't do anything on Shabbos. The next day is Yom Tov. He also can't do anything. So Chol HaMoed, he will burn it in the Beis of Sreifa. That's the halach. I want to say it's like this. Whenever you got a psul in a korban, we burn it in the Beis of Sreifa. A korban that becomes possible, we burn it in a special designated fire, which we say, not on the Mizbeach, Beis of Sreifa. There is a Muslim called Ibul Tzur. Ibul Tzur means like this. If the psul in the korban is not so dramatic, it's not so fundamental, then what we do is, we do not burn it in that fire until we've waited for it to become really possible. How do we wait for it to become really possible? Noisa. We wait for the next day. The next day it's leftovers, and then we put it on the fire. And that's called Ibud Surah, so to speak. You change its face. You change it. What? Beis HaSreifa. Again, a korban that is possible, you burn it to Beis HaSreifa. A korban where the psul is not so fundamental, we do ibud surah, which means that you wait for it to become noisa. Once it's a noisa, then it's really possible, and then you burn it. So over here, is it really possible? It's not such a big psul. Because at the end of the day, it was a good Korban Pesach, just we all disappeared on it. But over here, anyway, there's no problem, because he shechted it on the Shabbos. Since he shechted it on the Shabbos, he's going to wait until Chamod. But then it's long noisa, so you burn it to Beis HaSeifa. But let's say it's a weekday. That means, imagine we ask you on a weekday to shech the Korban Pesach for us. And then we all do a trick, and we all join another one. Or Chas v'Shalom, we all die. And now Ben's left by himself with his Korban Pesach. He didn't know, and he shechted it. So he's not chayav, he's not done an avera because he didn't know. But it's Torah b'dvar mitzvah. What should he do with the Korban Pesach, he finds out on a weekday. What would you say to him? Would you say put the Beis HaSefer straight away, or would you say Ibutzur that he should wait for it to become Noisa? Why straight away? What? Oh, that's the discussion. You burn it straight away. That for something to change, need to uproot it. Hi Pesachu. Really, it was called Pesach. The given the less lay by the it's got no owners because we all either disappeared or died. Have they still be good for? And Motilochi so for yeah, that's why it makes a lot of sense to burn it straight away. And the almost have a shlomim. Automatically, once we all move away from this common Pesach, it becomes a shlomim. So besulim mishumai. If indeed it's a shlomim, can anybody guess that looking further? What is the psul over here? Again, he shechted, Ben shechted for all of us, and none of us are part of the group anymore. What's the psul? So what's the psul? He's not yet, he's just shechted it before it becomes next day. Why not? Oh, because after the Talmud. So what's the psul? Psul mishumai because he shechted it after the Talmud, but that is not a real psul. Ibud boy, you should have to at least wait for Noisa. Why did we say that you're allowed to destroy it straight away? We should say you need Ibud the Tanya. If a psul isn't actually in the covenant itself, yourself miyad. The damu b'balim. If the problem is with the blood, with the owners, to what also be to be sasefa. Very briefly, the question that was like this: you just said that you don't need akiva. If you don't need akiva, so therefore automatically becomes a shlomim. If automatically becomes a shlomim, so what's the psul? Because you shechted a shlomim after Thomas ben Arbaim. That's a very minor. What's up for intrinsic? What? No, it's not intrinsic. It's exterior problem. An exterior problem for that you can't burn it straight away. You have to do a butzur. And in fact, it doesn't say butzur as a kasha. Answers the Gemara, Eloisema shochte stam kasha l'shem oila, Eloisema shochte l'shem oila kasha. The Gemara retracts. The Rav never said lo boy akiva that you need akiva, and when we said that asham shadita kliviyah it's kasha as oila, it's only if you first uprooted it. Says Ma'am boy akiva, you need to do akiva. For the boy that doesn't work. Ulam chie ba gam de doma nizko bichabur v'omri kigol shebalim tvei mesim nedoch lepesach sheni. We discussed earlier if a person shechted, when he's got chametz in the house, he shechted in the middle of Pesach, a korban Pesach. And the Mishnah says that we're talking about that he is chayav for having chametz in the house. It's chayav having chametz in the house. Why is it chayav having chametz in the house? Because he shechted the korban Pesach. The problem is, what do you mean he shechted korban Pesach? It's the middle of Pesach. He can't shecht the korban Pesach in the middle of Pesach. Answer: the Gemara explained earlier that we're talking about where he never bought the first korban Pesach because he was Tommy. So he's designated this korban Pesach to be for Pesach Sheni. So it's still a korban Pesach. But you see that if not for that, if not for the fact that he needs to be korban Pesach, it would automatically become a shlomim. So you see, lo boy akiva, they don't need akiva. But the problem is, what doesn't come back. Here we've got a concept called dichu. Dichu works like this. If you've got a korban that was never suitable and then becomes suitable, that's a kosher korban. If a korban became suitable and then unsuitable and then suitable again, that will not be a kosher korban. That's called dichu. Dichu is a concept when something became unsuitable. After it was very suitable, it can never be used again. Over here, we're talking about, well, what happened was on Erev Pesach, when it came time to shech the korban Pesach, we were still on the korban. So this korban was actually suitable. And then what happened was we all died on the Erev Pesach afternoon after it became suitable. So it was nira v'nidcha. Nirva nidcha is a proper psul, and therefore it can't become a shlomim. Rav holds that when an animal is still alive, there's no concept of dichu. He holds the only concept of dichu is when the animal is already being shechted. So according to Rav, does anybody know when would you have dichu? It's not so easy. When would you have dichu according to Rav? When would you have dichu according to Rav? How could you ever have dichu according to Rav if an animal The answer is that you shechted the soil mishtaleach. So you shechted the soil Hashem, and you spilled the blood, and then now the blood's lost. So it's dichui, and the animal's not alive anymore. So therefore, you have to start the whole process again, and the soil mishtaleach again, because that's called dichui la'chabis. What?
That's different carbon. It's not the original carbon.
Yeah, but what happens is like this. It was suitable when you sent the soil mishtaleach. It was potential to have two seim. But then what happened was you shechted it and then you spilled the blood, so it became dochui. So now the other one's also dochui, because what happened was it's a dichui achamisa. Okay. We said this once before. Normally when you shech the korban shloi lishmoi, it is kosher. The exception is only two korbanos which you shech shloi lishmoi that are possible. What are the two korbanos if you shech lishmoi with no good? Pesach, very good. What's that one? Pesach and Chatos. Pesach and Chatos. We said according to one Tana Osham, but Pashas Pesach and Chatos. Very good. Pesach and Chatos are the only korbanos. The Torah uses the word hu, an extra time the word hu by Chatos. Chatos hu, Pesach hu. To dash it has to be lishmo. We have a chiddush from Rabbi Lezer in Zvochim that not only the shem the korban Chatos hu, you have to do shem lishmo. If you do lishmo, it's not possible. We have a chiddush from Rabbi Lezer that all other kabbalas for shlomim, toida, oila, if you shecht it lishmoi, what's the din? Kosher. But if you shecht it l'shem pesach or l'shem chatos, it is possible. Just like if you shecht the pesach al chatos lishmoi, it's possible. So too, who adin? If you shecht another kabbalah l'shem pesach chatos, it's also possible. And therefore, according to him, it is all possible, and that's the chiddush over here. So, man, Ablezi, the man with Chiddush, the Chiddush Pesach, possible to have a psula beguf. Fading more, we Ablezi, Chatas Labi Bechayev. Don't let's Ablezi Tuvit Vamis Potter. If the last case of our Mishnah, which we're now trying to explain, is going Beshitas Ablezi, that what? That when you shech l'shem Pesach is considered possible because it's Shloi Lishmoi. So then why does the Mishnah finish off what we said earlier, that Ben would not be Chayav Chatas? Why would not be Chayav Chatas? What did we say? What was the reason? Because it's Tuvit Vamitzvah. The Rabbi Lezer doesn't hold him to a mitzvah. So therefore, according to Rabbi Lezer, he would be chayav chatos. That means this statement. Let's go through the statements very clearly. A person went to shech to the korban Pesach where there were no owners left. Why were there no owners left? One of two ways: either they died or they switched to another korban. Then the Mishnah would say two halachas. Halacha number one: the one who shechted it is not chayav chatos. Why is it not chayav chatos? Tuvit mitzvah. Halacha number two, if it's a weekday, you can burn it immediately. Why can you burn it immediately? Because it's psul begufan. These two halachas don't work. If you're like Rabbi Lezer, that Shalom Lishmo is psul begufan, but he doesn't hold Torah b'dvar mitzvah. And if you're not going to shittas Rabbi Lezer, it's not psul begufan, because we are holding now that you don't need that kira. Since you don't need that kira, so therefore, we're going b'shitta that if you don't need that kira, so what is it? It's a shlomim. A shlomim, the whole psul of shlomim, which you shechted it after the Tomei Shvena Arbaim, is not an intrinsic psul, it's an exterior psul. If it's exterior psul, it shouldn't be possible, it should be the Yitzhak Beis HaSreifa. Says the Gemara, Tirgma of Yosef of Salach Hasida, Kabed of Papa, Yosef the son of Salach Hasida, son of Papa, Harmani of Yosef and Chunoi. That's not Yosef and Chunoi, Iman is Chotim L'Shem Pesach, L'Shem Chatos Psulim. Alma psule begufoi umshmoch yisov miyad ubtu yisov kabishua. We have a Tana that there are two arguments should not bless and bishua. One argument, Torah b'dvar mitzvah. One argument, if you shech the korban shaloi lishmoi l'shem Pesach, if it's possible or not. Yosef and Chunoi in one argument holds like Rabbi Lezer, in one argument holds like Rabbi Yeshua, and therefore it is all settled. Regarding the question if it's possible or not, he holds like Rabbi Lezer that what if you shech something to Shem Pesach, it is possible. Regarding the question of it b'dvar mitzvah, he holds like Rabbi Yeshua, and that is how it fits in our Mishnah. The Tanya, he has a second answer. He says like this. Shmuel says, let's say, we said before, that if a ben of somebody else shechs the korban Pesach and there's no owners, there are actually three ways there can be no owners. I said before two, actually there's three ways. How can there be no owners? They die, they join another chabur, or they become tam. So what's the din? Is better chayv chatos or not? We pass like a bishor to the says potter. Says a bishmor that if he could have found out, that means we all died early enough that he could have easily found out that there's nobody left around on this Korban Pesach. Then what's the halacha? He is a chayv chatos. Why? You can't call him a Torah Dvar Mitzvah anymore. You could have found out, right? Let's say we will die a week before Pesach. Get the what's the words for it? The Saskim's text. You should know already. So what's he going to do? Say, I shech the Korban Pesach, think it is still. Why not?
No.
How Beis says, Bila Momas Kol Netzach. You need a smartphone to get text.
No, the
Okay. The Beis. You don't. So if the world says, then you're chayv chatos if you could found out. So Shmuel so far says a simple halacha that what? That if you could have found out in plenty time, then it's chayv. Says the Gemara, right? But for yoytz the Beis HaSreifa, and he goes out the Beis HaSreifa when? Straight away. Now the question is, why is it going to Beis HaSreifa straight away? We said previously that when a korban loses, when a Pesach loses its owners, what does it become? It becomes a shlomim. So why should you get burned straight away? L'chayre should be a psul shaloi begufoy, and you should eat ibutzor. I saw my time alam mishum deloi boyakir. Says the Gemara, mimai. Dilma mishum desova lo ketanet ve'rabba ba'avod oma afilu pigonami boyibutzor. Dialef oven minoisa. That means like this. There is another shitta. We said before that ibutzor is something which is required only by a korban which is not properly possible. Once it is properly possible, then you do not need ibutzur. So why over here does the Beis say that you need ibutzur? It must be because you don't need akira. So if it's a korban pesach, shadishchat, shalele ba'olov, and that's why it's possible to psul begufa. Says, well, no. There is a Tana that holds that even something which is completely possible, what's the worst kind of psul you can think of? Pigul. Even in such a case, you need ibud surah before you get rid of it. Says the Gemara, according to him, the reason you need ibud surah is not because you don't need akira. Of course, you need akira, and really, it is a common Pesach. So even if it's you need akira, and therefore, even if it's a shlomim which was shechted by the korban, which by therefore, even though it's shechted with a complete psul, you still need ibud surah. Even if a korban Pesach is shechted shloi lebolav, you need ibud surah. It's so like it's rabbi vod. I'm after people not ibud surah. Alif oven minoisa. We do exertion for noisa. The third case where there was no owners was what? When it all became tummy. Now, in such a case, normally we said that if all the owners die, or if all the owners transfer to another korban Pesach, so what does this korban Pesach become? What does it become? A shlomim. But if the owners become tummy, then it doesn't become a shlomim. Why doesn't it become a shlomim? Because Pesach Sheni. So Elamai, what's going to happen is that this korban which is shechting is a korban Pesach Sheni Bolov. And here you can't say that automatically it became a shlomim, and that's why it needs ibud surah. Because over here it's certainly not a shlomim. It's a korban Pesach and it still needs ibud surah. So what it says later, of course you need akira. Why? Because over here it's a korban Pesach, and afa pikain, we say that you need ibud surah. Why should ibud surah? It's super good for you. That when it comes to Pesach Sheni, everybody agrees that when the owners are Tomei, everybody agrees that the korban remains a korban Pesach. And this Beis has to go according to Yisroel and Chonoi. I just finished. Many more times. This was the next word. I want to recap tiny bit some of the main principles we learned today. There's a concept called ibud surah. Ibud surah means when the korban becomes possible, you burn it to the Beis HaSreifa. If the korban becomes intrinsically possible, then what happens? You don't wait straight away, you burn it straight away. If it becomes an exterior psul, we do ibud surah. What does ibud surah mean? You leave it to the next day, then it becomes noisa, and then you burn it. We have machlokas, there are some shittas that hold that you always need ibud surah. We learned a machlokas as to whether you need akira or not. Akira means the uproot. when you have a korban which is going to eventually become a shlomim or an oila, do you need to make a decision to uproot it to become an oila or shlomim? Or does it become automatically without a concrete uprooting, does it become an oila or shlomim? That's another machlokes we learned. Another machlokes we learned is Rabbi Lezer Yisroel, whether you say such a thing as Torah b'dvar mitzvah. Rabbi Lezer holds you're chayav v'chatos always with shos as your father. Rabbi Shmuel adds that even the person's Torah b'dvar mitzvah, it's only in a case where he couldn't have found out. If he could have found out easily, let's say the owners died a week earlier, then he's not a Torah b'dvar mitzvah, he's chayav chatos. And we also learned like this, that there's a concept of dichui. Dichui means a korban which was royal and then became unfitting, that even if later became fitting, it will never be good. And therefore, for a korban to change from Pesach to a Shlomim, Rashi explains, it had to have been never suitable. But something that was suitable on their Pesach, to korban Pesach, and on their Pesach afternoon, then it became unsuitable, we don't use that ever again as a korban. Okay, Mazel Tov. Today's daf was a lot of Yisroel. I wish tomorrow we're starting a new parak, new topic.
You said that earlier before. Yeah, that died. But also, you go to the animal before the people. So what's the...
I didn't catch that.
So you say before the animal, you have to die, you
Yeah.
start death. But also, some animals, you have animal, you have to feed the animal before you feed yourself.
Not this one. Not this
So
one.
what's where's the animal come into play?
I'm thinking about 6
Not this one.
I'm saying, but why is there no Sabbath?